First up is a new film called The Bikeriders, and it is from writer-director Jeff Nichols, and it's based on a photo book from photojournalist Danny Lyon that chronicled this biker gang from somewhere in the 60s to somewhere in the 70s, and it's basically a woven tapestry of these kind of, interesting characters. It stars Tom Hardy, Austin Butler, Jodie Comer, Mike Feist, Boyd Holbrook, Michael Shannon, Norman Reedus, and a bunch of other folks. And I wanted to like this movie. I'm actually a really big fan of Jeff Nichols. I thought Mud and Loving and Midnight Special, he has done some films that I think are really wonderful. This one did not do it for me. You can tell that they are definitely paying attention to things like costuming and hair and accents, although the execution on the accents is very questionable. Jodie Comer's Midwestern accent was very grating. So you can tell that they like the things involved in it. However, story-wise and character development-wise, it is very ambling and meandering, and I think when you base something on a photo book that is not necessarily telling a narrative, you have to weave a narrative into it, that is your job as the person adapting it, and I was surprised at how that really didn't happen. There is a story at the core of it. It's just sort of the evolution of these characters along the way. And my other few kind of notes about it is I don't have a problem with relating to a character who's morally ambiguous as my protagonist, right? That's fine by me. Tom Hardy is this motorcycle club leader, perfect in the role. Cool. Does he do some questionable things? Absolutely. Do I think he's still magnetic on screen? Totally. So, I don't have a problem with that. But aside from Tom Hardy, I felt like I just had no investment in any of these characters. And that is only through the strength of Tom Hardy's acting and probably me just liking him as an actor. You have Jodie Comer as the kind of narrative device between her and Mike Feist, who's playing Danny Lyon, the, photojournalist. It's a lot of voiceover, and I get a little bit frustrated by the abuse of telling me, not showing me, because a movie is a visual and auditory, but it's a visual medium. And so a lot of the film plays out through interviews with Jodie Comer, who plays the wife to Austin Butler, who's the kind of bad boy of the motorcycle club. And, not to harp on this too much, but the accent is grating. And so having her be the main narration, I was like, oh no, this is a choice. Austin Butler as the bad boy is fine, whatever, I guess. I don't think he's that good of an actor. At least he's not overly Elvising in this. But, again, I think it's just a bunch of tapestry moments versus a cohesive film. And that's not what I was expecting based on Jeff Nichols' previous work. And I think my other thing is, again, I don't have a problem with the moral ambiguity of some of these characters and being able to invest in them. I just found myself thinking, this is just a super homogenous group of people who it's trying to feel like a little bit, we're, outsiders and we're, rejected by society and all this stuff. But at the same time, it's a bunch of cis-het white dudes who are at the top of the food chain socially at that point. So some of them are kind of, I don't want to say choosing to be outsiders, but many of them would have had opportunities that other folks would not at that time. And those other folk are involved in stories that Jeff Nichols has actually explored. Loving is about the couple that basically fought for legal biracial marriage, right? So yes, that character is somebody who is on the margins of society because society pushed them out versus some of these characters who, again, circumstance, socioeconomic stuff, whatever. But I didn't feel bad for any of them, but the film was kind of asking me to, right? It's kind of asking you to sympathize. And I'm like, at the end of the day, this is just a bunch of dudes in their motorcycles, having fun. Okay, cool. Why am I supposed to feel bad for them? And, the film is asking you to feel bad for them. If it had been a different narrative, it's a different story. The other thing I was like, okay, is this just for people who love motorcycles? But the film also, as far as I could tell, and maybe just because I don't speak motorcycle, doesn't exactly spend a ton of time being like, look at this pretty chrome bike, or look at this Harley, or look at this whatever. They talk about it sometimes. Again, the telling me instead of showing me issue, but it's not even a love letter to the thing that brings them all together. I think the most interesting part of it is the kind of push-pull between Tom Hardy's character, again, he's the leader of this motorcycle club, Austin Butler, who is this bad boy who everyone admires, and Jodie Comer, who is his wife, who, is like, stop riding, this is, dangerous, etc. And the love triangle, I would say, but platonic love triangle between the three of them, I guess 4 of them if you count the actual motorcycles, but it wasn't enough. Just if you want that, go see Challengers, which also stars Mike Feist. But I just did not have enough to connect to this film from. Again, it's well shot. The production value is high. The acting moments are fine when they have these acting showcase pieces. But the other thing that really kind of frustrated me is I didn't feel a chemistry between any of the characters at all. They're in scenes together. I'm like, are we just like doing a table read? What's happening here? I went in with much higher expectations. I would like to temper yours. It's not a terrible film. If you like bikes and you like bike culture, you're probably going to get more out of this than I did. But if you were just kind of curious, or if you were in Camp Austin Butler and you're like, oh my God, I want to see anything he's in, just be aware that it's not even like a smoldering gaze at him, right? Like, who does this movie like is my question. Like, who are you trying to tell the story of? I know who you're trying to tell the story of. It's the Bikeriders, but it doesn't do a very good job of just creating an investment in the characters, the story, the time, etc. So for me, it's going to be a 3 out of 5. The next film I have is called Thelma, and ironically, it also centers around a scooter bike thing of sorts, although in this case, it is a mobility scooter. Thelma stars June Squibb as this character called Thelma, who is a 93-year-old, because June Squibb is a nonagenarian, so hell yeah, keep working, lady. She is a woman who gets scammed, unfortunately, in a telephone scam, and decides that she is not going to take it, and she is getting her money back. Her grandson is played by Fred Hetchinger, her daughter is played by Parker Posey, her son-in-law is played by Clark Gregg, and then you've got the legendary Richard Roundtree. I think this is sadly one of his last roles. You've also got Malcolm McDowell, Ruben Rabasa, and Nicole Byer. And what I love about this film is that it is the slowest action film ever, but it is treated like an action film in many ways, which was super cool. I just love June Squibb, and I love this character. And so watching her just roll around on the scooter, and so it's like the slowest high-speed action chase you've ever seen, her determination to like get what's hers back, and also just the frustration at watching her deal with technology. It's so brilliantly captured. Josh Margolin wrote and directed it. It is based on his own grandmother, and thankfully I think she didn't actually send the money through, but I loved this movie. I thought it captured family dynamics super well. You know, it is this portrait also of aging in a way that I think it really did do a good job of sympathizing through the lens of somebody who is aging, and not making us go like, oh, woe is them, but going, okay, cool, like you can live a fulfilling full life at 93, but there just are things that are going to change and you have to deal with. And some of the things that, you know, as a younger than 93-year-old person, I don't think about necessarily, but maybe I should start planning for on behalf of my parents and myself and all of these things. June Squibb is just a star. This is not news to anybody, or it shouldn't be news to anybody. And if you weren't familiar, like, June Squibb is amazing. You know, I love that she is in Inside Out 2 as nostalgia, and now she's going to have this movie going on. I'm like, you go, girl. And not as if she needs anything from me. She's Oscar nominee, all this stuff. But I just thought this was a really well put together, fun, enjoyable film. It had heart. It had sad moments, you know, especially if you are close with anyone older in your life. Like, you will worry, call your mom, call your dad, call your grandparents if they're still around. Like, you know, it's a wonderful film that actually has action in it, but isn't like overtly dependent on it. You know, June Squibb is illuminating. Richard Roundtree is wonderful in it. It just, all of it. It comes together so well. I really enjoyed it, but I also was emotionally invested, unlike something like the Bikeriders. So I'm going to give this a 4.7 out of 5. The last thing I have this week is a new series out on Netflix, and it is called America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders, which is maybe one of the last things I would have expected to watch, but I was invested. I know nothing about the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders, but apparently they have a long legacy of just, you know, kind of revolutionizing the way that cheerleaders market themselves in some ways, right? Like, as an organization. This comes from the same people who did Cheer on Netflix. This is also on Netflix. And what I appreciated to a degree about this was the dichotomy between this and something like Cheer. Cheer is full of a bunch of diverse young folks from kind of all walks of life, and they're all looking for different things, versus this Dallas Cowboys show where it's like, no, we're going to be pretty upfront. We want a very specific type of person, right? Let's be honest, white and blonde, or maybe brunette, you know, is pretty much the type. There are a few people of color in it, but it was pretty upfront. You know, I was kind of shocked. I was like, I think Texas has like a decent Asian population in certain pockets. One Sri Lankan girl, you know, is featured in this very briefly. So to its credit, I would almost say, it is just like, we are who we are, and we don't care about diversity and inclusion. There are people of color in it, like I said, but the hero folks tend to fit more into what I think you would think of when you think of Dallas Cowboys cheerleading. That's not to knock them. They are interesting. You know, again, it's also a lot of folks are just very religious, which is not something that, given my background, I grew up with. And so seeing them be so kind of open about it is honestly like a weirdly refreshing in some ways. It's not too preachy, which is fine, but just the kind of ruthlessness with which this organization runs is impressive. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know about the legacy of this. There's pressure from some folks who are, multi-generational cheer families. It's just an interesting look at something I had no idea about. I then found out, or, they kind of also mentioned in the show that for years on a network, CMT, there was a whole American Idol-esque, or not American Idol-esque, but because, you get to vote in American Idol, but there was a whole reality show that centered around the audition process and all this stuff. And I was just like, this is a world I knew nothing about at all. And so this is a very well produced way to get a look into it. It is 7 episodes. I blazed through it. I don't want to say morbidly fascinated, but I was morbidly fascinated by this. I think if you are already a fan of the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders, you're going to really enjoy getting to see this very behind the scenes look that feels less, it's very manufactured and produced, but they're up in their faces and they're like there for some of the tougher moments, which I don't know if the reality competition show got the chance to get to know the leadership and things like that. If you have no idea about this like me, this could be fascinating to you. If you have no interest in this, I'm not going to push you to watch it, but if you watched Cheer and you liked it, this fits into that streaming corner of the universe. So America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders is out streaming now on Netflix.